The other thing that Republicans are having trouble with is Joe Biden's, I wouldn't say impressive. Well, I mean, it is sort of a big jump. And maybe, I don't know, this won't hold up. But Joe Biden's approval numbers, I mean, it's hard to imagine that, like, people even question this beforehand. And I have to say, like, I'm a little bit surprised at how sort of dramatic. Adults 18 to 44 now approve of Joe Biden's handling of the presidency by a 51 to 40% margin. Biden's net approval of 11 points, that's the difference between 51 and 40, among younger Americans reversed from a net disapproval of 11 points in August.
Yep.
If my addition is correct, that is a 22-point swing on his approval rating from people 18 to 44 for Joe Biden. And
we know what happened during that time. He canceled $10,000 of student debt up to $20,000 if you got Pell Grant.
Yep.
And man, like, delivering for people, it works for you. Shocker.
His approval rating is still not in positive territory. You got the olds have a little bit of an issue with him, but nevertheless, hugely popular. And they realize this too. Here is Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump's nemesis, speaking at the Heritage Foundation in Orlando, Florida, discussing debt forgiveness. And I don't know, this point seems to be like, this seems so, I don't know, mid-2000s to me, 20 teens. But here's Ron DeSantis arguing, you don't need to go to college anyways, so that debt is ridiculous. Now, huge percentage of people, I don't know if it's like close to 30% of people who got loan forgiveness never completed college because it was too expensive.
A lot of these students are going to go through no debt, and many of them will be making six figures within just a couple years. The truck drivers are making that immediately once they go. So let's just look to see where the opportunities are. And you're not any worse than anybody else because you didn't get a four-year degree. In fact, think of all the people that had four-year degree in zombie studies with $100,000 in debt, and then they end up in a job they could have at a high school. You look and compare someone that goes into electrical, they're making 75, 80 grand, then they're making 100 grand, then they start their own business in their mid-20s and they start making, really significant income. Those are good pathways. And we're not telling you have to do one or the other, but what we don't want to do is try to shoehorn every single student that comes through our school system into traditional four-year universities. They need to know there's a variety of paths you can go and find what's best for you and then pursue your.
This is like such outdated garbage that I just don't think appeals to anyone outside of the halls of the Heritage Foundation. There has been a, I don't know what, decades of conditioning of telling people that the only way for you to enter the workforce and have upward mobility, and like borne out by statistics as well and reality, is for you to get a college degree. And so to try to stoke some sort of like class resentment as he talks at the Heritage Foundation for people who didn't go to college and working people who did go to college and are now struggling with student debt, there's no that distinction is not going to make a difference.
The solution is also to widely expand things like healthcare and other sorts of benefits that drive people to go to get that college education. The real prize of a college education is those things like healthcare. You'll get a job with things like that. If we really care about people who aren't going to college, we should extend those benefits to those people so they don't need to go to college to get them.
Yeah, I mean the bottom line is that they're trying to create this false dichotomy, and I don't know how they sort of like where they learn that their sort of like agenda should be to claim that people who go to college are studying basket weaving or zombie studies or whatever it is that they think that they're doing.
That only works in rooms full of rich people who never had to finance education for anybody.
Right.
They should have gone and gotten a degree in economics like I did from Columbia, and then they would have been able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Of course. They should look around at all the people who'd studied exactly what they're claiming other people did, but just were wealthy enough not to have to take a loan out.
It's like the number one concentration in the country right now is people going and being funneled into these finance jobs because they want a return on their investment. And like that is part of what college debt does. It is a disciplinary tool that keeps people going into these industries that are soulless and helps capitalists.
DeSantis, by the way, a Yale undergrad and Harvard law grad.
But you always have to look at when a guy like DeSantis tells you about all these opportunities and stuff. They're not trying to help you get an opportunity and get a leg up in your career. They're trying to lower labor prices in those industries. Like trucking now is a big problem. It used to be coding because coders, there used to not be enough people that knew how to code. So like go into coding. That's what we want, the venture capitalists, so we can hire you cheaper.
And zombie studies, bro. Like, I mean, again, I think this guy's peaking. That's weak. That's weak.
Also, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Maybe the teach. You can acknowledge that trades are a viable path for people. Of course they are. They're a viable path for the vast majority of people who graduate.
But I also think you should stand up for, like, even people who go into trades. Like, there should be state-funded humanities education for
Without
everybody.
a doubt. Without a doubt. There's absolutely no reason that it has to be exclusively you going into a trade. And first off, there's been very little done by the Republican Party on behalf of truckers. I think they relaxed the amount of hours that you could be forced to drive as a trucker, if I remember correctly, in terms of regulations. I don't know what the status of that is.
Republicans should relieve their debt for their sort of professional debt that they have for different licenses and trucks that they have to buy.
I would note, too, that every free college or the free college proposal made by Bernie Sanders included vocational schools and trade schools. And, a decent amount of these for-profit university loans were also sort of like more technically oriented in terms of trades.
And I would be in favor of broadly liberatory policies for, say, truckers who have to go into debt in order to finance their own profession because those regulations have been so loosened by Republicans and others like them.
Train Boy, part of what DeSantis is saying is true. We should normalize not having a college degree. In my experience, higher education exists to sandblast any original idea out of their students' heads with the bonus of keeping students in debt peonage. But this debt peonage, I first of all, I disagree with that. I mean, I don't think not having a college degree is not normal. I think that might be a reflection of your personal experience. But I will say that the debt peonage is a new phenomena. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you did not get this type of debt peonage. The most expensive colleges cost maybe 15 grand a year. Literally like a sixth of what they cost now. There was more grants available. And there just simply was not, and you could get out of college debt as well. State universities were far less expensive because states would subsidize them heavily, and that all changed through the 80s into the 90s, and certainly by the aughts. The state colleges were far more expensive, and it essentially pushed up. As states were able to offload the expense of the education onto students, it essentially created room for private colleges to raise their tuitions.
Yeah, and I talked about this actually, this is a good plug for my interview last week that I pre-recorded with Will Bunch, right? also the Republican Party and Nixon and Reagan understood that these college campuses, which were fairly cheap to go to at that time period, were becoming these havens of civil rights activism and like broader understanding of power structures. And so there was, I think, a concerted effort to loosen the reins of those things, and it was a twofer for them. And so, like, people understood in the 60s and leading up to it, there was a sense that if you want to have a middle-class job, if you want to participate in the American dream, you have to go to college. And at the same time, there was an explosion in the cost of that. And then you have for-profit chain colleges, and you have Wall Street entering into the student debt market and exploding that. And here we are today. So I just don't think, I think you're feeding into Republican framing when you're saying that there's a distinction between, say, like working class or middle class people saddled with student debt and people who didn't go to college who are also struggling. That's just giving into that framing.
I mean, this is about if you have to go serve a capitalist after you turn 18, or if you have more education provided to you. And it's simple. Back in the New Deal, it was they were campaigning on this guy from Alabama saying that, like, poor kids should have every right to study English as rich kids do. And that's as simple as it is.
Slappy Tubbs, I went into debt for $10,000 to get a welding certificate, and it would have been over twice that if I went for a 2-year degree in welding. Welding, not zombie studies. Jonathan Armstead, DeSantis has been using this zombie studies line for a while. He apparently is upset at a course at St. Xavier University in Chicago that uses, quote, the model of zombies to introduce students to fundamental biology concepts, including enzymes, pathogens, and disease outbreaks.
Right.
He's an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a fun way of thinking about things like infection, which is, I think, a type of education that DeSantis doesn't want to see further.
Matt, I think you said that exact thing when you were speculating what the zombie studies were.
Yeah, there's zombie studies. There's like, people use vampires because it's just like a metaphor for like disease and stuff like that.
I mean, they harped on some class that was I remember this years ago. It was like a Harry Potter class in literature, and it was the end of the world. As if, professors don't try to make their subjects a little bit more interesting so it can be a vehicle to understanding other things. So dumb.
Ronald Reagan, people keep asking me why John from San Antonio and myself have not been invited to appear in studio for midterm coverage. Everyone is asking about this. First of all, you live across the country. You're going to fly out here to come in studio?